Well, I hope you enjoyed that. We recently learned that one of the groups in the film doing work with former miners, the Coalfield Development Corporation, may lose its federal funding this year, and that would cripple the program and hurt a lot of people who really, we think, deserve a second chance. So I'm happy to say that Bloomberg Philanthropies has decided to make a grant that will keep the budget whole and keep their work going. We are also supporting two other great organizations that are helping to keep coal communities, help them make the transition to other kinds of employment. This is a big challenge, and it really requires all of us to help and great leadership to solve it. Technology is ending jobs in lots of industries, not just coal. There were 800,000 coal workers back in the year 1925. 1980, we had 250,000 coal miners. Today, there are about 55,000. So most of the decline in the employment in the coal industry had nothing to do with the search for a more friendly environmental fuel. It was technology. And whether you realize it or not, when you see all those empty stores that we see as we drive down the streets of Manhattan, of New York City and other cities, people who used to work there are unemployed, and they're going to have a tough time finding jobs. And so we've got to, as a society, find some ways to pull together and to create the kind of jobs that they'll be able to do, or train them to fit into jobs that are available. Because if we don't have that, we're not going to have a society the way we want it. And I think instead of confronting Washington head-on, maybe we want to step back and just do it ourselves. We don't seem to get a lot of help there. And now you saw that the film ends by asking the public to support the work through a crowd-sourced campaign that we are going to match. Foundations can't replace government action, but we certainly aren't going to sit back and wait for Washington either. And I hope all of you will visit the website and learn more about the campaign. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a great panel with us today to discuss some of the issues that were touched on in this movie. The movie tried to present both sides of the issue. Those people who are coal miners and were screaming, "Open the mines again," they really do have a problem, and they would do we're doing the same thing that you and I would do. They'd fight to find ways to feed their family, and we have to be sympathetic. But at the same time, the science is pretty clear. This is damaging our environment and long-term damaging the climate. We have a very special guest to lead a panel to let us understand all of this. He is a great actor and a great New Yorker and a great friend of mine, Edward Norton. Now, I was glad to give Edward a Mayor's Award back in the year 2013 for his work supporting the arts, and he really has been very generous in that support. He's also a founder of Crowdsource, which is in 5 years has grown into one of the largest fundraising platforms in the world. And this year, you should know that Edward and his team will drive around $2 billion in donations to great causes, and that's going to make a great difference in a lot of lives. So, Edward, if you come across any interesting scripts that have a role for a ruggedly handsome former mayor and tech entrepreneur, please call my agent. Thank you all for coming. Now let's give a warm welcome to Edward Norton.
Thanks. I was told backstage that Mike has also allocated budget for massages and bourbon shots for all of us to help us unclench our shoulders and untwist our backs after watching that. Joking aside, I think for many years, I've lived in New York 26 years, and I've often had the very undemocratic thought that we should have made Mike mayor for life or something like that. But when you contemplate what Mike and his team at Bloomberg Philanthropies are achieving and leaning into, maybe it's better that you're unshackled from the inefficiency of government to do incredible work like this. And I know truly we're all incredibly grateful for the leadership that you're continuing to show and reminding us that we don't have to wait for permission to act as citizens, and that government isn't the only way to get things done. So thank you. It's my pleasure to get to introduce a lot of the people you saw in the film, and I'll just get right to it. Mike Bonfiglio is the director of From the Ashes, which we just saw. He's an Emmy-nominated filmmaker whose credits include ESPN's highest-rated documentary ever called You Don't Know Bo. Mike Bonfiglio, please welcome him. You just saw Misti O'Quinn in the film. She's the Dallas resident who, and mother who was spurred to action after coal pollution gave her 2 children asthma, and she's been a tireless campaigner in many clean air campaigns in Dallas, and including work with the Sierra Club. So welcome, Misti O'Quinn. You met Brandon Dennison in the film, nationally recognized as a social entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Coalfield Development Corporation. They've incubated 5 social enterprises that we saw there, and now trained over 300 employees, many of them laid off coal miners. Brandon Dennison. And finally, it's my special pleasure, a longtime friend of mine also was in the film, Marianne Hitt. I knew Marianne. She started this work with Appalachian Voices, and it evolved into being the director of the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. She is really one of America's most successful environmental campaigners, and a hero of mine, Marianne Hitt. Great. Thanks to everyone for joining us. So, Michael, I just wanted to start with you. You know, in the course of the time you made this film, a radically unexpected outcome in the election landscape, to say the least. Can you just talk a little bit about how the election affected the process of making the film? Did it, obviously you had to work a lot, you had to work quickly to build a lot of the ripple effects of that, the change in the conversation. Just to let people know a little bit about what it was like to be making this film across that election.
Yeah, like probably a lot of people in this room, we were incredibly depressed after the election. We had shot most of the film. We were well deep into editing, and I think initially, you know, it affected the tone of the film in a way. I think that, again, like probably everyone here, we expected a different outcome to the election, and we were trying to make something that would be a little more reassuring, that there is change coming, it is happening, it's inevitable, and it's okay, and we're going to get through it. After the election, it changed the tone of the film a little bit. I think that's still there, but we had to scramble to kind of chase the headlines of what regulation is being rolled back today. We were a little less concerned with reassuring people and trying to galvanize people a little bit more, I think, than we initially had planned.
Do you think that despite the incredibly fractious tone that was created by this election, do you feel that there are commonalities? Is there a capacity within this conversation to reach across the aisle and I mean, you see the Texas town that's stepping into kind of defying cliches and knee-jerk assumptions about where progressive ideas about this are happening. But do you think, should we be really concerned, because sometimes you don't know in an election where people are just making a lot of noise and where that represents really deep-seated social antipathy toward an idea. Do you feel that do you feel optimistic, having met and talked to people, that there is an ability to bring people together around a common goal?
I think there is, and I think it's a lot of it has to do with kind of the work that Brandon is doing. You know, especially in Appalachia and in the Powder River Basin as well. What we found was that people just want to work. They want to have jobs. And there is definitely, especially in Appalachia, there's a cultural connection to coal and to the coal industry. But it didn't seem to supersede the desire to just have decent family wage jobs. So I think as what we hope the film will raise is the idea that it is inevitable that the market is going to change this, and we need to be investing in ways to put people back to work, and coal just won't be the answer to that. So I do think that there is potential to make it better. I don't think it's all cultural at all.
And maybe it's for Marianne and Brandon. I think it's such an incredible statistic to read that 7,500 deaths a year can be attributed to coal. In 8 years, coal pollution is killing the same number of people as American soldiers who died in the Vietnam War, twice as many people who died in 9/11, and yet, when we perceive an assault on our society, like we did here in New York in 9/11, the response is trillions of dollars of military action, a willingness to sacrifice more lives, etc. But twice as many people being killed a year by an industry, and our response is to defend it. Why is it that you think communities have been successfully galvanized to point their anger at the progressive movement toward a cleaner future, as opposed to at the very corporations that they seem very aware have victimized them historically? I think so many people are mystified by the success at getting the very working class people who are most injured and the communities that are most injured to point their anger in the wrong direction. And I think both of you would probably have pretty unique insight into that.
Can I try a quick stab at that? I think sometimes there is a strain from urban communities. They confuse the coal miner with the whole industry. And so I think sometimes it's tempting, if you see a coal miner on TV defending their job, like Mr. Bloomberg said any of us would do, it's tempting to blame that coal miner for climate change or for dirty air or for all these bad effects. But really, just about anyone who turns on a light in our country, there's a very good chance that that person is just as guilty for all of those side effects as well. It's the whole energy system. And so I think folks do need to be careful to, when you see a coal miner on TV, don't attack that liberal anger at that coal miner, kind of in vice versa, I think, and just understand that person's just doing what they need to do to feed their family. And then providing opportunities, once the industry is going away, providing opportunities to transition, so it's a just transition.
I think a couple of things. So I live in West Virginia, and my daughter's an 11th generation West Virginian through my husband's side of the family. And I remember sitting in people's living rooms in the heart of the coal fields watching the evening news, and there were always commercials on for the coal mining companies on the evening news in the coal fields. And I remember, the farther you get away from the coal fields, you wouldn't see these kind of commercials. And I remember thinking, why in the world does a coal company need to spend money showing commercials in the place where they're really the only game in town? But I think there has been a very intentional effort to make people feel like they don't have any other choice than coal for their economic opportunity. That goes from the heart of the coal field to the state capitals and coal states, and then is reflected in the United States Senate. And so the work that people like Brandon are doing to show that there actually are other opportunities is actually a lot more revolutionary than it might seem if you're away from that area. But the other thing I would say as director of the Beyond Coal campaign that I have seen is people who are on the receiving end of the pollution outside of those communities typically don't know that their child's asthma or the mercury or arsenic or lead that's in their water is actually connected to a power plant. There may be this facility down the street and they never knew what it was. They may have assumed their water was safe all along, and it's only when an environmental organization comes along and lets them know that it's not that they want to get involved. And so the Beyond Coal campaign is a movement of people who have realized that their kids have asthma or they have mercury or arsenic or lead in their water because they're on the receiving end of that pollution. And people hadn't connected those dots before. And once they realize that they can maybe make it safe for their kid to breathe, they can clean up their water, and then, as you saw in the film, actually have the victory of retiring a coal plant or bringing in a clean energy project, that is a kind of a revolutionary process, not just for those individual activists, but for those communities, and they won't be going backwards after that.
Misti, can you talk a little bit about, we got to see so much of what the struggle that's represented by the impacts on a family, just an American family like yours, and a working mother. Talk about the process that you went through in terms of going from the daily struggle of meeting the actual need of your family to somehow finding that much more bandwidth in your day and your time to actually become an activist. Because I think, one of the things that's most impressive to me is people who don't have a lot of resources of either time or money and yet rise up and become citizen advocates. I think it's really one of the most heroic things is the people who have the least finding that extra time. What was it that tipped it for you from being something you were actually just trying to address the practical challenges of, to somehow saying to yourself, I'm going to go and be a part of doing it?
That little banana eating boy that y'all saw in the movie, that's what did it. And I don't think it's so much stepping away from everything that you have to do, so much as it's a choice. I'm choosing to make things better for my son. And other mothers are gonna choose to do something to be better for their kids. Before, like I stated, I thought that asthma was something, it's my grandmother had it. That's why my child has it. And then to find out that it's something that we can change, it's something that we can affect, why would I not? That beats the alternative, which is watching my son lay with that mask on his face every 4 hours and taking oral steroids and just going through the rigmarole. It's something that can be alleviated. So that gave me the get up and go to say,
And do you sense a lot of these things in the moment feel like despairingly slow? I think a lot of times I find myself feeling like, we have very limited time to address this. Do you sense in your own community, in the African community, American community in Dallas, do you sense growing awareness? Do you feel that there is a penetration of the progressive messaging about where these problems are coming from, what people can do about them? Do you sense a shift in your own community?
I do. Me personally, it started with initiative Breath is Life with Sherelle Blazer and Sierra Club. And that's where I started getting a little bit of knowledge. It opened my eyes to certain facts. It made me feel empowered. And the more that I deal with it, the longer that it's gone on, I've seen other people slowly get involved and other people realizing this is change that needs to be made, that we can make it, and they're realizing how much it affects them in their personal life. Nobody ever really wants to get up and do anything when it doesn't affect them. But when you're able to see the way that it affects your life, especially when it's so detrimental, it will make you get up and move, and more people are.
Brandon and Marianne, I think even though the point is made that the diminishment of the coal industry is driven, actually ironically, much more by other elements of the energy industry than it is driven by the EPA or anything like that. It has more to do with market pricing even than litigation, et cetera. And you could, someone being cold could say, there's really not that many people even in the coal industry anymore, but these are states, these are communities, and it still has a certain scale to it. You don't think of, West Virginia is not a place necessarily where wind turbines are gonna replace coal, or solar power is gonna be as natural as the American Southwest where you have abundant energy. Are there opportunities for the coal communities to actually participate in a direct transition into the renewable economies? And not, Brandon, I know your approach is kind of a wonderful portfolio, but is there a direct transference available between the dirty energy and clean energy economies for those communities?
There really are real opportunities. I think the first thing I would say, I mean, yeah, clearly one industry won't replace all those coal jobs, but that's kind of the whole point. I mean, even if you take the morality out of the discussion, it's just not good economics to be totally dependent on one industry for survival. You never want to put all your eggs in one basket. And so that's kind of why we have this portfolio approach to try and develop new markets. Our solar enterprise, Rewire Appalachia, we never planned on doing that. We just had a construction crew. We became the first licensed solar installer in southern West Virginia, and we got kind of inundated with requests for installs in West Virginia, which stuns people. And so that was just a market decision. So I think there are real opportunities.
And I would add that even though the market is, I mean, I don't know if there's been a more exciting time to be paying attention to how we make our electricity in this country since the Industrial Revolution. Because yes, we have market forces that are disrupting everything, and yet the coal industry is very good at holding on to political power and insulating itself from those market forces, hence all of the Donald Trump photo ops you see with him parading around with people from the coal industry. And the key ingredient, I would argue, that is actually driving that shift is advocacy. Yes, wind and solar are now cheaper than coal. And yes, coal has competition in the marketplace that it's never had before, but the coal industry is incredibly powerful and incredibly good at shielding itself from those market forces. And the Sierra Club is fighting coal plant bailouts and attacks on clean energy in just about every state in this country. And the reason that we're continuing to move the needle forward, and the reason I hope everybody here leaves feeling hopeful and optimistic that there is still a path forward on climate change, is because of advocacy. And we have this network of tens of thousands of incredibly sophisticated advocates, community leaders like Misti, innovative social entrepreneurs like Brandon, who are on the ground in the places where decisions get made in this country about how we make our electricity. And that's not in Washington. That's in communities, in states, in cities, as you saw in the film. And so in these coal communities in Appalachia, even if we don't have the political leadership, we have people on the ground who are going to figure out how to make it happen. And even if at the federal level we don't have the leadership on climate change, we have this network of incredibly sophisticated advocates on the ground who are going to make progress on climate change and clean energy continue to happen.
That's great. And do you, as a follow-on to that, and not to lean too much into the catastrophe of these kind of gestural executive orders on rollbacks of clean air, I think a lot of people in the environmental community, my friends at Earth Justice, at things, I think that sometimes people aren't aware how difficult it is in a sense. You can't just sign an executive order and necessarily roll back environmental regulations. Do you feel that despite all the noise being made about it, we can take some optimism from the idea that it is actually going to be more difficult to structurally, apart from the fact that the industry itself isn't coming back for market reasons, is it possible that a lot of noise is being made, a lot more noise is being made than is going to actually be able to be affected on a policy implementation level?
Yes. The good news, in addition to the fact that this grassroots rebellion is going to keep making progress on climate change, the other piece of good news is that these rollbacks that the Trump administration is attempting on climate, on clean air, on clean water, there actually are long, lengthy processes where there are a lot of opportunities for public engagement, public comment, for us to fight in the courts. And we're already on track to meet the carbon reduction targets of the Clean Power Plan, the centerpiece of what we took to Paris, because of this, again, this incredible grassroots rebellion of people all around the country. We're actually on track to meet the targets of the Clean Power Plan. If we keep going, the work that you saw in the film will get us a long way, maybe 60% of the way towards meeting our Paris climate target. And what I worry about is that whatever moves do get through from the Trump administration around rolling back clean air and clean water and climate standards, they're not going to revive the coal industry because we're not going to stop. And they're not going to make good on these promises they're making to people in places like West Virginia, where I live, but they are going to create more air pollution and more water pollution and more asthma attacks and more suffering in this country. And so it really is everyday folks who are going to pay the price for those, but they're not going to slow the progress in the shift to clean energy.
I think my shoulders are unwinding. Thank you.
Welcome.
Following on that, Mike, I think as the director of the film, and I'm sure a partner with National Geographic and Bloomberg, and sort of maybe you could speak a little bit to what's the plan with the film, because I think it's a great tool for combating the ignorance that, and I don't mean ignorance, let's say the misinformation, lack of information that fuels people's anger, possibly. And it is, you know, of course, there's always that danger that we're talking into an echo chamber of people who already, everybody here in the room, we're having a conversation with ourselves. How do you get a film like this, even beyond a big national platform like National Geographic, which does probably demographically skew toward people who lean toward environmental protection anyway? What are you guys going to do to get this film into communities? Can you show this film in Wyoming communities, in West Virginian communities? Can you invite people to take a look at it and make it part of the conversation, a conversation that can actually advance the progress of creating community advocacy, or get communities to become more open to alternatives like Brandon's presenting? What's the idea around the film?
I hope so. You know, this is the first time that it's really been seen by anyone in the public, and so we're working very closely with Bloomberg Philanthropies and with National Geographic and with Sierra Club as well to bring it into individual communities. And I think that also, the film is. It could also be consumed in sort of bite-sized pieces. You could look at just the section in North Carolina about coal ash and let people know about that particular issue that a lot of people just don't know about. The same thing with air pollution, like what people are facing in Dallas. You don't think of Dallas as a place that, or of Texas as a coal state, but it actually is. So I think that it is structured in such a way that people can not necessarily have to take in the whole 80 minutes, but 10-minute chunks that may resonate with particular communities. So we're in the process of working on a plan to get it out there in a variety of different ways. And our partners at Bloomberg Philanthropies are just incredible in terms of being creative, and we at RadicalMedia are working on ideas as well to try and figure out how to get it to people. Our intention was not to make something that we are preaching to the choir. I mean, that was always in the back of our minds as we were working, because there is a value to that. I think there can be, because it can energize people. But our goal with this film was really to be able to create something that spoke to people on all different sides of the aisle. It's not really a political issue. Health is not a political, or it shouldn't be a political issue. So hopefully, I'm sure that some folks won't like what they're seeing, but we tried to just kind of make everything based in reality and facts and allow people to make up their own minds.
As a nice segue out of that, I think Mike mentioned it. There is, for anyone feels motivated by watching the film, there's a website set up, fromtheashesfilm.com, and on that, via our platform CrowdRise that Mike mentioned, you can contribute to Brandon's organization and other organizations like it that are helping communities transition out of coal. So I'd encourage everyone to at least check out fromtheashesfilm.com, because there's some very easy engagement, and it might be the kind of thing that's worth sharing around. But following on that theme, really everyone, I think, could comment on this. What do you think? This is kind of it's a hackneyed question in a way, but I do think people think about it, whether in urban communities like New York or what do you think is what can people do? What are the, from your perspective, fighting in the trenches on the front lines of it, knowing what can people do apart from contributing what they can to organizations like Sierra Club, Earth Justice, Brandon's organization? What's the most powerful way that people can engage once they've seen something like this?
Well, I'll start, and I'm sure y'all have some great ideas too. So everyone in this room, when you turn on your light switch, there are stories like this behind your light switch, and it's not just in Colstrip, Montana, or in Dallas, Texas. It's all over this country. For every story that you saw in this film, there are dozens more incredibly inspiring advocates, incredibly harsh kind of suffering people are going through because of coal pollution, and incredibly heroic, smart grassroots leadership. So everyone is connected to this, and also climate change may be on your doorstep before you know it. My hometown of Gatlinburg, Tennessee, experienced these devastating wildfires that were made worse by climate change over the winter, a place that I thought would be the last place ever affected by climate change. And so I say that as in a way to really encourage you all, in addition to getting involved and supporting this great work, we need all of you. And think about what gift you bring to this work. If you're a storyteller, help us tell more of these stories. If you have a big platform, a big megaphone, help us elevate this incredible movement of people around the country. If you have financial resources, contribute those. But this really is an open source campaign made up of people working where they are to get their cities to move to 100% clean energy. We have a campaign called Ready for 100 at Sierra Club, where cities are pushing citizens are pushing their cities to go to 100% clean energy. But you're connected to this through your power source, so get involved with the Sierra Club, get involved with the Beyond Coal campaign. We can help you reach out to the decision makers to shift your power to clean energy, and think about what gifts you bring to this that are really just unique to your gifts to the world.
Brandon, from your perspective in West Virginia,
I think speaking from Appalachia, I would ask the country on a philosophical level to believe in us. I think sometimes people say, well, why don't those miners just move somewhere where there's jobs? And that's not really fair, right? These are our communities. My wife and our newborn are home there right now, and that's home, and we have mortgages and relatives and family cemeteries. And so just believe in us in our communities that we can figure this out and we can get to newer and better. And then follow that belief up with investments. Certainly, this campaign is a phenomenal opportunity. We welcome the donations, but also we're trying to set up real businesses, real social enterprises that make products. We install solar panels, we make furniture, we produce food. Ben Gilmer with Refresh Appalachia is in the audience. It's do business with us. Help us become entrepreneurs. Help us diversify our economy, because we can do it.
I think, simply put, I would just say organize. There's power in numbers. Don't stop. You yell from the rooftops until you're heard. And even when they hear you, keep yelling until they move. That's what I would say. Everybody can make a difference. When you catch that reality and that idea, what I feel, what I want, what is best for me and what is best for you, I can make a difference. Once that light comes on, things happen. So do that.
Mike?
I would say vote. I mean, half the country didn't vote in the last presidential election, and in local elections, let your local officials know that these issues are important, that public health is important, that if your water is poisoned, your air is poisoned, that we want these regulations that actually protect us.
Can I
Yes.
Misty or Brandon reminded me of this. There's several other people here in the audience who are in the movie that I just wanted to note. Bruce Nillis, who runs the Beyond Coal campaign with me. Sherelle Blazer, who is the Dallas organizer. You saw Mike and Alexis from Montana. So the two ladies from North Carolina.
Deborah
I believe are
Graham
here.
and Amy Brown
Yep.
are here.
So I just
Heidi
wanted
Binko with Just Transition Fund.
Yeah, Heidi Binko, Just Transition Fund, Ben Gilmer from Refresh Appalachia. So you're in a room full of some of these heroes, and I hope you all take the chance to look for them and get to know them and say hello.
Amen. That's a great note to end on. Thank you guys very much. Thanks for staying.